Hello, I'm Greg Schwank, and welcome to our special screening of The Dry, presented by the Newport Beach Film Festival and the Orange County Film Society, and in partnership with IFC Films, the Consul General of Australia in Los Angeles, Variety, and OzFilm. Immediately following the screening, you'll have the opportunity to see a special Q&A hosted by Steve Gatos from Variety and featuring Robert Connolly, the director, and Eric Bana, the lead actor. If you enjoy this experience, we encourage you to please come out to Newport Beach this fall when it's hopefully safe to return to see films the way they're supposed to be seen, with a live audience, in a theater, on the big screen. Now, please join me in welcoming Ambassador Jane Duke, Consul General of Australia in Los Angeles.
Thanks very much, Greg. Hello, my name is Jane Duke and I'm Australia's Consul General in Los Angeles. I'm delighted to provide an official welcome for this special screening of The Dry for the Newport Beach Film Festival and Orange County Film Society. This adaptation of James Harper's novel about a fictional rural town in Australia in the grip of a devastating drought is polished, tense and intriguing. It's a powerful murder mystery directed by Australia's Robert Connolly and stars the charismatic Eric Bana. The cinematography is stunning and it's a beautifully produced film. It is quintessentially Australian in its language, its setting, and its characters. The evocative depiction of Australia's vastness and a landscape that was once lush and is now bone dry and barren adds atmosphere and tension to the story. It's a fantastic example of an Australian story being made and produced in Australia. Australia is becoming a global drawcard for film production, with major Hollywood studios and streaming companies coming down under. Our great infrastructure, skilled crew, diverse landscapes, and production-friendly policies are all part of the attraction. The growing list of productions has led the media dubbing this influx as Aussiewood. The Dry made a big splash at the Australian box office during the pandemic and is already one of the top 15 highest grossing Australian films of all time. I'm pleased that award-winning Eric Bana and Robert Connolly are on hand to share with you their experiences in making this movie. I hope you enjoy it and the discussion that follows. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deanna Hamilton.
And I'm Heather Kenahan.
And we are the co-directors of feature film programming for the festival. We are thrilled to have Eric Bana with us today, the co-producer and star of the film, The Dry. Our Q&A will be led by Stephen Gatos. He's the Vice President and Executive Director at Variety. Stephen will talk with Eric.
And also the director of The Dry, friend and alumni of the festival, Robert Connolly. We're very excited about this special Q&A and we hope you are too. Enjoy.
Gentlemen, thanks for taking time to talk about this terrific picture. And you know, there's so much behind it that's fascinating that may not be known to US audiences, but is a major event, certainly in Australia, because of the involvement of both of you and the novelist and your producing partner. Let's start with that collaborative process as a team. My understanding, Robert and Eric, is that you work collaboratively and you share a space creatively, and this came about as it wasn't that you were introduced on this movie. There is a pre-existing friendship and creative partnership. Could either of you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I think we've been in this office here, sharing this creative space for about 11 years now, and we've worked on several other films, which began with Richard Roxburgh's directorial debut, Romulus, My Father, in 2007. And, you know, we've had a great kind of journey in our careers together, you know, shared by physically having a creative place to meet and toss around ideas, but also in various different films. And it was here that, you know, Eric and I first discussed The Dry and whether we could collaborate on it. So it's quite a gift in my career to get to work with a very close friend on an Australian film that, filmed, 5 hours from here where we live in Melbourne.
And Eric, what do you think is the secret sauce or the sync that you have, the interface that you have with Robert? Because there are a lot of notable director-actor partnerships in this great history of film. What do you think you guys have in common, or what is the common interest or the secret of your partnership?
We have very similar tastes, and we have similar aspirations for the end product in terms of them, if it's for the cinema, being as cinematic as possible. And we just shared the same vision for the film after reading the book and for its potential in terms of how cinematic it could be, the themes of the film, the tone, particularly the pacing, and length and so forth. So there was just many touch points that we shared the same kind of vision for. But even when it came down to editing and so forth, I mean, I think just about everything we had the same ideas about. So it was a very effortless collaboration from that point of view.
And also, a lot is made, I think, in the press notes that I've read, and also the Australian press. A lot is made of the fact that this is the first time Eric has returned to leading a film in Australia since the picture, Robert, that you just mentioned. Is that coincidental, or is there a reason why the last time Eric was in a film, leading a film in Australia, was with in partnership with you, and now he's back doing this again? How has that come about?
I'm very glad that that's how it's worked out. It's a bit of a journey, isn't it? Like finding a project that you are compelled to want to make, and realizing that with feature films, they're like an incredible jewel in the crown of your career. They're handcrafted. They are made with a great amount of kind of love and creative input from the team you work with. And so I think we've been looking for a long time. I just think it's hard to find projects that you feel this passionate about. Wouldn't you agree, Eric? It's like the journey we've been on here has been a long one to find.
Yeah, it hasn't been through lack of trying. Like, we've been looking for another film to make together. It's just taken this long. But at the same time, I'm not that surprised, because I think both Romulus, my father, and The Dry, in terms of writing quality, are pretty rare. I mean, even internationally. I mean, it just takes a long time to find things this good. But I'm thrilled that it was something that was, Australian, and that we could make here for sure.
And either of you, could you talk just a little? You have a very important woman at the two women at the center of this project, the novelist Jane Harper, but also I was reading about Bruna Papandera. And as you just said, Eric, good material is tough to come by. And according to what I was reading, Bruna had a good sense of that and actually took this off the market and got there before the book was ever out there. For the first people who came and said, I've got to get this book, found out Bruna was there first. Can you talk a little about that, how that worked?
She's got an incredible, voracious kind of reading appetite, Bruna. I mean, she's had a great track record of finding works and adapting them. I think, Big Little Lies was a triumphant kind of TV series. She was involved in Gone Girl. And I think her capacity to find work, I can never quite believe how much she's able to read. And the fact she reached out and said, there's this unpublished manuscript you should read. Mm-hmm. And that I read it. It had won a Victorian Premier's Literary Award here in Victoria as an unpublished manuscript. And so I think it's something that Bruna really prides herself and her company on, is this kind of capacity to look at literary works. I mean, I think even Warm Bodies, I remember when she produced the film Warm Bodies, her telling me about this author she'd discovered who was yet to be published, who'd written this book. So unless she's got like about 30 hidden people reading for her, I think she is quite an incredible.
And decisive, moved quickly as you need to do.
Yeah.
Do you think there is something about this particular film that may be special for the Australian audience that is unique to Australia, because there are numerous aspects of it that translate internationally? It's universal. It's a great detective yarn. It's a great story of introspection and looking back on your life. But I think the specificity of the drought and the conditions and the economic hardships, but are there elements of this story that you think are especially relevant to Australian audiences right now?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's something Eric and I have talked a lot about. It's like finding highly specific stories that speak to the world, like, you know, rather than making a generic film.
Yeah.
Just that, you know, and is actually to make a highly detailed and specific Australian story set in a real world close to here with a real Australian characters and our vernacular and how we inhabit the world, but in a way that has big universal themes that speak to the world, rather than the other option is that we try and reduce our Australianness, you know, and try and hide it in an attempt to appeal. Whereas I'm excited that, you know, we've got this great partner in IFC releasing the film in the US, and here's a film with an Australian book, an entire Australian cast of some of, you know, our greatest actors, established and emerging, that also takes an American audience to a world they haven't seen before, like a side of Australia they haven't seen. And I think that's the kind of work that interests us. We're not trying to reduce our stories to be just generic and palatable for the world. And yet we are looking for stories that have a universality that can speak. And there are many issues and themes and the fundamentals of the detective genre within the film, and the invitation to the audience, you know, can you work out who these, you know, criminals are? Anyway, that would probably be something more philosophical that we're looking for in our work.
Yeah, the classic whodunit is never far away, but there's so much more going on. You know, I wish I could remember who said this to me, but it was the ultimate formula for international filmmakers. Tell universal stories, but do not lose your home address. And I think that is something that is really one of the many things about The Dry that is remarkable. It has a very distinct home address, but the story is completely universal. I'll ask you a slightly cheeky question. I'm giving you a warning. The book and the movie is really existing on two planes, the plane of the present and the plane of the past. And Eric, your character is the, you know, embodiment of this duality. You know, we live in our heads a little bit in the past and what's shaped us and what's happened. Especially your character has a very haunting, traumatic past. It informs who he is today and how he does his job, and also how he's allowed to do his job or blocked from doing his job. I was thinking that 20 years ago, for both of you, you both kind of emerged in big ways around the same time, around 20 years ago. And Robert, I'll start with you. If you were to approach a story and material like The Dry, how do you think Robert Connolly, the filmmaker or the person, approaches this story today? How would you approach it differently 20 years ago? What might the last 20 years have changed in the way you would engage in this material?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. You know, I've got 18 and 16-year-old daughters, and my early films were driven by a different interest in cinema. They were more narrative, and they were kind of clever. I'm really proud of the films and my early work, but I feel like something's happened in the last 20 years that, as a journey to become a father and to get married and experience the world differently, to travel. You know, I made the film Balibo in East Timor and saw that side of the world, and I've worked in other parts of the world that kind of revealing something of the big questions that are facing us right now. And so I would like to think that the emotional richness, and something I just think Eric embodies so powerfully in The Dry, this kind of cathartic journey of someone dealing with the past and the present, and that emotional richness and the kind of the way cinema can be a microscope into the human condition at its best. You know, it can look into the human condition, is something that I've become increasingly interested in as a filmmaker. Whereas I think maybe earlier I was, you know, my first film, The Bank, played at the Newport Beach Film Festival and won Best Film. You know, it began my career, you know, at this festival. And I look at that film and I'm really proud of it. But I definitely think that the work I'm doing now is reaching for something that is emotionally richer. Certainly the issues facing the world, you know, of climate change and the year we've had with COVID, and, you know, some of these issues are so kind of prevalent in creative endeavor now, and the question of why make things. And so I think the world's changed in those 20 years too. Yeah. So,
Eric, how would you see yourself grappling with this character 20 years ago?
I don't think it would be any different at all, really.
Okay.
I've just always enjoyed the experience of being in someone else's shoes. So I think my approach would be largely the same. I just look a little younger, I guess.
Well,
you could have played both versions of yourself if we did that. We could age you up and age you down.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I'm watching you on the screen and I'm thinking, wait a minute, what's this guy doing? What's his regimen? Because he looks exactly the same as he did 20 years ago. Another way to look at material, you know, when you read something and you think, you know, we may be tackling this thing. An open question for either of you. You read something and you think, wow, this is really exciting. But you also might look at it and say, well, that's exciting, but this looks really challenging. Can you remember either of you facing down this book and thinking about what was either or both most exciting about the material and most difficult to get right, most challenging about it?
The most challenging thing for me was how to entwine the past and present.
Mm-hmm.
You know, two crimes, two different periods of time, and not wanting it to feel like, I guess I like philosophically that the past and the present are like hand in glove, you know, or something. And you know, and the edit took 6 months, and, you know, you add the complexity then of it's a detective mystery. You want it to be fun for the audience. You want them to enjoy investigating, you know, working out, can they solve the crime? So you need suspects and I'd never done a detective mystery before. Mm-hmm. But I think that was more the technical challenge. The creative challenge was the past and present, and wanting them to kind of be seamless and to move between them in a way that the audience could kind of slip in and out of, and to believe that these characters were the same people. And it's something I'm really proud of, you know, working with the incredible editors, Nick Myers and Alexander De Franceschi, and cinematographer Stefan Duchion, finding creative ways to make the past and present kind of
make it a cohesive,
you know,
have a rhythm.
Yeah, dance together. Yeah, they dance together in that. But that would be my biggest.
And Eric,
challenge.
when you read this character, can you remember what you found most exciting and or most challenging about what you were taking on?
Yeah, I remember early conversations Rob and I having in terms of the production. I think we identified that the edit was really going to be key. And we were really conscious of, we had this saying, like, just don't stuff it up during the production. Mm-hmm. We felt like we'd done so much work and there were all these elements that we had to capture, but knowing that the real storytelling was going to be told in the edit in terms of how the flashbacks were dealt with, the pacing and so forth. And Rob identified that, you know, really, really early on. So it was the pressure of just trying to do the best cinematic version of what we had on the page during the shoot. But in terms of elevating from the novel, it was really focused on trying to get the most emotional version of the story on screen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Jane does the most incredible job with the novel. It's like, well, how do we elevate this? We want to be true to it, but how do we elevate it? And the two things we identified was giving it the cinematic scale it deserved, and for it to be as emotional version of a thriller genre whodunit that we could have. And the elements were there. It was just a case of, well, how do we make Aaron more emotional? How do we make his journey feel richer? And it's obviously aided by his relationship with Gretchen, played by Genevieve O'Reilly, who's phenomenal. But that was in terms of how Rob and I worked together. That was a real focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Aaron is interesting I always, hesitate to ask questions about acting and directing but it's good because not being an actor or a director, I can ask the stupid questions that the average person is wanting to know. This is a detective story. In some ways, there is action in the movie because violent things happen, but they've happened in the past. They happen off screen. We recount how they happen. But your hero and the character of Aaron, to me, you do a spectacular job of having a sense of menace, a sense of potential violence. You seem, to be on the verge of violence through the whole movie, but you never spill over. From an acting or a directing point of view, keeping on that beam, keeping on that mood, is that something that is hard to do, or you're conscious of doing it, or you talk about it in any way, shape, or form? How do we sustain this note?
It was something I was conscious of, but I think the thing that helped me was never underestimating the fact that there was a story in the past that the audience were witnessing. It wasn't being told in a narrative sense in the present. They were witnessing it through the flashbacks. So I was having the confidence in the present to go, no, just pare it back. They've experienced that. They've just come from that. They know what's happened.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a gift to be able to have that handed to you, almost like a baton from young Joe Klochek and all the younger actors, and from Rob's work. And then with that going, less is more, because the audience has experienced it.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And there's two things, Robert, from the director's job. One is the locations, and forgive my ignorance of all things Australian, but this location is so critical to making the movie work. What went into finding the right location? How easy or difficult was that? And my other question for both of you would be, the world that you just brilliantly portrayed in this movie, is that a world either of you have spent much time in?
Yeah, good questions. Look, it's we were based in a town called Warwick-Nabil, for anyone who wants to jump on Google Maps and see where it is. It's 4 to 5 hours from here, and we're in the Melbourne CBD here. And it is in like our food bowl, really, for this state of Victoria. And it has historically had cattle on it, but they're not able to be supported on it anymore. It's traditionally had wheat, but in times of drought, it's now got lentils and other, products that are grown there. It's an incredible world, and one of the things I love in the films I make is taking an audience somewhere. I'm not really shooting in a studio kind of director. I like going somewhere, taking the audience there. The joy for the audience is they can watch and see a world that's unfamiliar, that they've never been to. We shot on big, large format cameras, to get the capture for an audience the kind of visceral nature of that world. So it was critical, really, to film there. It was kind of right at the heart of the project to actually go there, to film there, to use locals, to, wake up every morning and watch the incredible beauty of the sun rising over this amazing landscape. A landscape that's tough as well, but incredibly beautiful at the same time. So no, I can't see any other version of the film than filming out there. I mean, very early on, Eric and I went out there and found this area, and, we discussed the logistics of taking our whole crew there and now taking an audience, an audience in the US there. So I think that part of Australia is, very, very kind of precious to us in terms of this film and how we depicted it.
Yeah, beautifully done. And the other question would be, I thought about this after the movie, after watching it, that people have in their mind what an ensemble is. And ensemble, usually you picture, sort of the usual suspects where they're all crammed in. A John Huston movie, all the characters are crammed into one room, like the Marx Brothers stateroom scene, and that's the ensemble. But what you have is an ensemble that when the movie is over, you realize how really tightly knit everybody in the story is. The scenes are spread out. They're not in every scene together, but they're consistently in scenes together. Would you like to say anything about your cast and pulling that ensemble together, or what your challenges were? I know one of them was casting younger versions of your older characters.
Yeah, you've got this big challenge in this genre that everyone is a suspect. Every single character is a suspect. So you need the best possible actors. And I think, US audiences are really going to enjoy seeing an ensemble of some of Australia's greatest actors. I mean, someone like Bruce Spence, who, is an icon of Australian cinema from the Mad Max films, who's in it, or Julia Blake, who's also one of our great actresses in her 80s. And then you get to meet these four young actors who are like the Stand By Me generation actors of our story, who are now going on to massive careers, Bibi Betancourt and Joe Plotchak. You want the audience to kind of enjoy that. My wife casts all the film and TV I do, and it's her skill to work with Eric and I and the other producers on finding the cast. But she has this whole mantra that a film is only ever as good as its weakest performance. So she kind of challenges that even the smallest roles are critical. But in this genre, I think, as you're pointing out, the cast's really critical. You have to believe that any individual character you meet in this film is a suspect.
And so the chemistry the chemistry of the acting ensemble. One last question for Eric. I know from talking the last few minutes here, the perception of, Eric Bana left Australia. The last film you made as a lead was 14 years ago, and now you're returning, isn't exactly accurate. But would you say, could you talk about the 14 years since you made Romulus, how you might have seen the industry change, the circumstances, the situation in Australia, because we know in the US and most of the world, but aside from COVID, there's this thing called the streaming revolution, and the theatrical experience is completely changing. So here we're going through disruption. I've been in variety a long time. I've never seen as much disruption, good and bad, as I've seen in the last 3 years. Could you talk about how Australian filmmaking might have changed over the past decade or two?
Yeah, I don't know that it's changed an awful lot. Maybe it's because I live here. Maybe I don't notice the changes so much. Yeah. As you mentioned before, even though it's been, I think, 12 or 13 years since Romulus, I live here, so I don't really feel like I've left or come back. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I think our industry's, very small, and I always like looking at it over a 3-year cycle, never over a 1-year cycle. The amazing thing about what's happened this year is that in terms of disruption, we've just been able to turn the industry on its head, because we've been told for the last few years it's all about streaming and blah, blah, blah. And The Dry opens theatrically in Australia and becomes one of the highest grossing films of all time here. Suddenly it's incredible. Like, oh no, people like going to the movies. It's like, fantastic. Okay, right. So in terms of disruption, it's like, be careful with making absolute statements when it comes to the various spaces. I think there's obviously room for both. Rob and I obviously feel really passionately about the cinematic space. We're not adverse to the others, but there was no version of The Dry that was made for the small screen. The
Yeah,
Dry was
yeah.
made for the big screen, and every
Mhm.
decision and intricate detail that Rob put into the film is for that cinematic experience. So the success of the film here has been so thrilling for us because people got to experience the film the way that it, and they understood that that's what we wanted for it. So I think things are, beginning of this year in pretty good shape. There's a couple other films that did well here as well, but we hope to keep challenging the norm.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, keep,
Well, listen, as three movie lovers here in the frames on the screen in front of me, all three of us, I love that we can end on good news, positive note. And I want to congratulate you on what you just told me, and more importantly, congratulate you on making a big screen film that IFC and audiences in America should be very excited to get a chance to look at. So thank you, gentlemen, and have a great evening, I guess. What time is it there? Last
11
Good
a.m.
morning.
Okay, have a great day. Good day.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for your time, Steve.
Thank
Great,
you.
great to
Real
chat
pleasure.
about-